discussion. I got a handout. What we're going to do today is we're going to cover some advising scenarios. I'm sure there's been situations where your student is talking to you and you're thinking in your mind, I don't know really what to do in a situation. So let's talk about some of those. I'm going to start with a little introduction of what we're doing, and I want to remind you of what's important things. So I put up our nice, lovely 4 objectives here for a little bit of time we have together. First, we want to practice your response to various advising situations. Now, really, you're going to be having a discussion about some of the best things you might do. Then I just want to at least remind you that we have an advising handbook, and I'll have a slide on that. But I would like at least a couple people in here to open that up, and I'll show you the pathway to get there. But it'd be nice to kind of remind you of what, we'll get there, that's fine. Okay. But as an objective, I want you to remember that you can use that advising handbook. C says use a developmental coaching model. All right, so I'm going to remind you about that just briefly. We're going to try to keep all these things in mind as we come up with answers to these scenarios. And lastly, consider best practices for Newberry College. Newberry is not like all other colleges, right? We're quite different. So think about what's best for this environment and our students. All right, so before we get into acting out a couple of scenarios for you guys, let's talk about the advising handbook. The advising handbook you were introduced to last year during the service, and I didn't want to print out a whole nother stack of them, but if a couple of you would volunteer, I'd like you to go to Microsoft Teams. And in Microsoft Teams, there's the faculty, the voting privileges folder. Open that up, go to files. Academic advising is the first folder in files. And open up the advising. We can just get a couple people to do that. That'll be helpful because as we're having discussions, you might be able to point out something in the handbook for us. Okay. The handbook contains a lot of great information, so please remember to review it before you get to your major advising season. All right, so that's the handbook, and then I want to quick remind you of the developmental coaching model that we're trying to do. This is a great example of what not to do when teaching, right? But I try to How many of you have good eyesight? But it's just, I just want to remind you that our students are at different phases when we're advising them. When we first meet them, it's really, really critical to connect with them. And that includes maybe telling them a little bit about yourself. And of course, make the conversation about them. But, you know, like if they share something and you can relate to it somehow. So that makes it. You will learn about their interests, and you might explain some information about core classes and major. That's the connect phase. Explore phase is when you're really trying to help them figure out what they're interested in. And sometimes they really struggle with this. So there's a bunch of strategies you can use in the explore phase. Dream and design phase is where they really start to think about, you know, maybe what career they're getting into and what kind of paths they might take based on what majors and minors we have, how they can get involved on campus, internships, so on. And then plan phase is where you really nail down their path and you move forward. Questions?
Lizzie, is there a list somewhere of every single activities that's going on and like groups and like
That's a great question. I'm sure John would answer that.
So when you say activities, so you're talking about student organizations
Yes.
on campus events, that's what you're saying?
For us to go to advisees and say, hey, there's this on campus, there's this on campus, you know what I mean?
So I'll first address, from an event standpoint, we do have something that's called the first 56. So the first 56, there's some type of event that's going on for the first 56 days of class
Right.
that, student affairs and student activities that they put on.
What
So-
about after
So after that, you can tell them to check their email for other activities and things of that nature. But I would honestly have to say Sarah Stoll over in Student Affairs and Michael Smith, they're gonna be the best resource for us.
that? Sit over the overall list.
Yeah, they will be able to give you an overall list of groups of sororities, fraternities, different types of interest groups. As a matter of fact, I had a student reach out to me, he's like, hey, Dr. LeSaine, I'm interested in pickleball and bringing in like a pickleball interest group of kids. Like, how can we do that? And so they would have a comprehensive list of all those different types of organizations.
Thank you.
Well,
And on the website too.
yeah, on the website, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm student, yeah.
But yeah, a nice collective list.
Yeah.
But yeah, the first 50 sites is very right. Okay, so our students may be at different spaces, so make sure that you're knowing what their needs are before you start. You might be. All right, so with that, we're gonna get started with advising scenario number 1. We are gonna get acted out a little bit for you.
All right, everybody, we're going into the future. Take yourself until next week, which is the first week of classes. First scenario, here we go. This is the first week of classes for the semester. You have a student who comes in to your office and they decide that after attending 2 class sessions, they do not want to take a designated class in their area of interest. What is the student do? And action.
Come on in. Hey, Dr. A, nice to see you again. Nice to see you.
So I just totally don't want to be in biology anymore. The professor is so dry, writes all over the board. I can't understand a thing that woman says, and I just don't want to take this class.
Well, I'm so sorry you feel that way. Have you tried talking to the professor?
No.
Oh, okay, well, we might be able to work on that a little bit. I do realize this is your first week of classes and it's your first semester. And you kind of need this course for your major. Are you losing interest in your major? Yeah. Okay. Well, that's okay.
All right, so what we want you to do is turn and talk to your neighbor. Say, neighbor, I'm joking. Turn and talk to your neighbor. Discuss the scenario and talk about what it is that you would do in this particular scenario. We'll give you 2 minutes to have those discussions and then we'll bring it back together as a group and we'll talk about it, all right? So, yeah, anybody just turn and talk. All right,
It'll be a lot easier.
It was elected, yes, it's your major, that's the problem. I would say, this is we don't know if it's a first year student, but if it's a first year student, it's easier too.
Yeah.
Because then we say, you know what, this is your first semester, you have time, maybe you chose first thing I would say is, why did you think you were interested in this major in the first place?
Right.
And then if that gets them back to where they want to be with it, then maybe they realize they got to take it. You can offer them to take it, say, maybe this semester this isn't working for you, but eventually, maybe you can take it another semester and perhaps it'll be a different time or another instructor.
Sounds like they could be confusing not liking this professor and suddenly not liking the subject matter.
Yeah, it could be the professor approach, their style. Or you say, you know what, you're young, you can choose another major. And if you just don't have a major right now, and we'll find another class for you, and you can pick up see what else you're interested in.
Yeah.
Maybe even ask them if they had another. Thinking of it.
Yeah.
Because the second day, first week class, they can still add a class in some other area.
I mean, if you could slide them into a class, maybe fulfills a core requirement, but also in an area that maybe they might want to.
Then they might like it, yes, that's why you, so they've got to answer some questions before we just take them on. Yeah, that's the bottom.
Yeah.
And that would help them, I mean, that's what I've done before, sure. It's always biology, it's never the end, it's never the end. Never art. It's, no, that's, I mean, that's good. It also depends on what year the student is. If they're a sophomore, junior, senior, they may have to stick with it and extend their graduation. And I've done that too with people.
Going on. So, let's put that in here. So, our scenario, and I go ahead and say it. Some of us are going to be having these conversations with students next week.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, as I was just telling them, I was having some conversations with some students already about this, incoming students. So our scenario, they come in after 2 class periods and say, this is, I don't want to do this. I don't think this is for me. And so how would you all handle it? Like, what would your conversation, what would be the next thing that you would say to the student? Anybody?
So what year is this student?
First year. This is a crush. That's first year.
You asked them how they chose biology as their major, like what made you decide to go into this? 'Cause we were discussing that, what if it were your parents that said you should do this to be pre-med so you can make a lot of money when you graduate from college, you know, like why, what are the probing, like, what's the reason why you picked biology? Because I love science, or is it because my parents, I don't know what I want to do and they told me that I should be in this major?
I love it. And that's connect phase. That's part of the connect phase right there. When we talk about starting to develop relationships with our advisees, getting to know them and what their interests are. Because, yeah, sometimes it's not the major that they want. Somebody's saying, no, you need to do this. So that's really good. That's really good. So,
And really dig deeper into the situation, because maybe they don't like understand the professor as far as, you know, their language. So it's like, even if they take another class or two, that's not gonna probably work. If they're really, really anxious about it, you know, there might be another section of that with another professor or whatever, so really kind of get their feeling of why.
Does anyone have a suggestion? If this is the only section of that class, they kind of need to take it. Anyone have a suggestion what you might do?
Well, I think we assumed that this was a first year student and based the response on that. And if it's a first semester, first year student next week, they have time to change their major. And we would start talking, you know, I would say, you know, maybe if this is after I asked the question that Tanya asked, which is the first one, yeah. After we find out if it's not really for them, we say, okay, you know what, you can wait a little while to select your major. And David and I were talking about how maybe we drop that class and add them into a core class in an area that they might have had some interest in, to see if that might be a possible major for them moving forward.
I was also going to say, we're making an assumption here that this has something to do with and actually, in fact, have nothing to do with this. It's cause of satisfaction. This really could be any range of things, ranging from just some outside constraints of feeling, oh god, there's like time pressures, I'm not sure how to balance it, this is gonna take a lot of time, to uncertainty that they don't feel this imposter sort of syndrome, and I don't think I can keep up with this. Anything could be the case, and we need to just keep our mind open.
absolutely, because I love it, because we're gonna have some students that are gonna have that, it just got real. Like they're gonna have that moment. They're gonna have church.
Yeah,
Go ahead. And then I got
about maybe they need to think about what are their other interests. You mentioned that word before, So have a conversation. Also think about what resources are on campus. So maybe, hey, you need to have this course, you have to be in this course because of what you want for your goal. Maybe that means, maybe you need to talk a little bit about study skills or how to interact with the comment of that JLindler play there was, how do you talk to the professor? And so sometimes maybe even you getting up there and walking the student to the professor and have that conversation with the three of you together so that student gets a little bit more comfortable talking to that professor.
One of the things we mentioned was that maybe it has nothing to do with subject matter. Sort of before with the actual faculty member, maybe they're not understanding what they're saying, or there's personality conflict. Sometimes it's just panic mode. You know, they say, well, this isn't for me, and really that's just panic talking of, oh, this is difficult. I don't know if I can do this. And in reality, this really is their dream. This really is what they want to do, but they're panicking because it's overwhelming. It's not like high school. You know,
Right,
everything just seems to come so easy to them. So I think also it has to do, it's in terms of helping them get ready to move forward. Sometimes they don't really necessarily need to take that class their first semester in. So sometimes they have time, and if they're really, that is their interest area, you might be able to say, well, you don't have to take this semester. Let's ease you into your first semester in and not throw all the science at you at one time. So sometimes you can play it, that helps.
Get your feet
And
wet.
that helps them, yeah, get your feet wet a little bit. Sometimes they can come ahead before they get to that class, but if it's something they really have to do, and they really want to go that route, they're gonna have to do it. It's either now or later, but sometimes just sort of rearranging what they're doing now helps, but you have to sort of get all the information. It's not like when you go to the doctor and you don't have information, you can't properly diagnose you or treat to do what's best for you. If you're withholding, or you just think something's not important to say, and you kind of have to sometimes pull it out of, because they're not always.
Good point. This is sort of a general observation. I'm thinking about like, maybe, you know, kind of- most of your high school pandemic, so nothing is what we would think of as normal high school. And so a lot of their benchmarks of what feels normal and right is all screwed up and not what we're used to thinking about. So they may be more unsure than they normally would be as first semester. Anyway, I think it's
Their attention span is one thing, because they've been learning online, sitting in a classroom is totally different, so a lot of those things.
One thing I was surprised, every semester, I start off giving every student a 3x5 part of my classes. They write down their name, their major, their interest, and their academic advisor. And so in freshman biology last year, 50 students, there were like 10 of them didn't even know who their advisor was. So one of the things I want to do this year with all my new advisees is send them an email Sunday saying, welcome to Newberry College. Here, I'm your academic advisor. I've met with you every summer. Here's where my office is. Here's my phone number. And you can reply to this email if you have any questions. Get that process started. Because you all started with the assumption that the student knew who the advisor was and where that office was.
right. Like, the idea about assume the student.
Okay, any last comment? But very great discussion. Did you want to add something? to
Oh,
it?
no, I'm good. I'm okay.
All right, so what we're gonna ask now is we have 7 more scenarios on that list. And we're curious what this group wants us to cover. So you kind of take a look, we're gonna see what you're saying, which numbers you want us to cover, because we won't have time for all of them.
Four. Okay.
Four.
Was it the first four?
We wouldn't have either.
Yeah, 3 to 4.
2, 3, and 4.
So we'll go 3 and 4. And, three, you receive a DFW list of your advisors shortly after the midterm. You've already met with those students about scheduling classes for the upcoming semester. How should you proceed?
Y'all know how this works, right? So you've already got their schedules made. You're like, yes, Lindsay, we got you scheduled. See you next semester. And then what happens next week? Emoji. Timothy Elson, right? Like, hey, Jenny, here's your DFW list. You're like, just met with all of them. So what do you do at that point?
Right.
Right. Yes. You're all panic.
Send them an email.
Yes, send them an email, right? Because you've got to send a report back to Timothy, right? Or Dr. Elson. You've got to send a report back and tell him what kind of efforts you've made. How do y'all keep track of that? What's the DFW? So that
Good question.
means.
Good question.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah.
Students who are earning a D in the class around and for withdrawal.
In those situations, when they come and how are you doing in these classes? What is your grade in there right now? And how well do you think you can pull this? So I try to have those conversations before I get that list from Timothy saying, here's your notes. So usually I get the list, I'm like, yeah, those are no surprises. And you, especially if it's not first year with these students, you kind of know who's going to be on your DFW list this way because they often don't have one DFW. It's not a one kind of thing. It's sometimes a pattern of behavior. So I'm always having to stay on top of the students, see how they're doing, and encourage them. What can we do to help improve this, whether it's tutoring, talking to professors, extra work, maybe putting them in touch, talked about earlier, the learning disabilities, because they have learning disabilities, I don't even know that. Having those kind of conversations ahead of time. And then, of course, if you do get the DFW, they can get confirmation that, yeah, this is not going well, and it agrees with what they've already told you, or they told you something other than the truth. Then you have to go back and have those, I email them, I call them, and sometimes they avoid you. I noticed that sometimes they avoid those conversations and you literally have to pull their stuff and track it down and wait out fast and wait. You and me, we're gonna talk.
A lot of them don't, you haven't even done their schedule yet because they haven't responded to you.
I was just gonna bounce off of that. I like that you're considering like proactively before you get that list, but if they seem reluctant and they're like, well, they don't go and tell you how they're doing in class, be like, well, if you're not sure, you can pull up your grades. Let's just take a look. And I've done that a couple of times, and then you can move into that conversation. We're like, well, what can we do to improve this before,
I think that's especially like the first gen. I've had a lot of students where they have something major going on. Like I had a student last year whose mother had cancer and he was her caregiver. And no one on campus even knew that. And he was failing a lot of his classes. And I'm like, I asked him to step outside, we talk, and I'm like, he's like, this is what's going on. But I was raised to take care of my own problems and my own business, and I'm like, we have resources. You can get, through student success, we can help you with that. So you can be online on the days when your mom has chemo, and things like, and he didn't even know that these were options for him. So that's a lot of times they have a lot of burden on themselves that they don't want to share. They're like, I can take care of all this myself. And it's just sort of, the wall is crumbling.
That's one thing about Gen Z, I'm glad you mentioned that. They feel like they're burdened. Like some of them really do feel like they're burdened. Some of them are afraid to ask questions. Some of them are afraid to ask questions. And I'll just be upfront and honest. With our Black male students, I see that a lot.
Yeah, I mean,
and I have to have real conversations with a lot of them, like, yo, ask for help. It's absolutely okay. You're not being burdened. Get the help that you need to get. So that's one of those Gen Z
first generation students, so that you can get a little bit more proactive about
Um,
giving them some suggestions?
We, I mean, it's actually a good idea to come up with different suggestions for how to work with first year students. One thing I try to do is, when I send out, Wolf Nation welcome list, there should be a column that actually says first gen. If they identify as a first year
Okay,
student,
that's right. it's-
yeah, it should be in there, but, I mean, that's something we definitely can pull, that's not an issue.
If African American, males are feeling like they're burdened, provide them, look, you're paying for these services, so whether you use them or not, you're paying for this, so it's just claiming something that's already yours. In a way that change that.
Yeah.
Mindset.
What's your
That-
thought? If you shaking your head.
Oh, I'm sorry, as a mother of 6 black males, I don't think that telling them that they're paying for it helps. So I don't think that, I'm just saying, I don't think that's a motivating factor. I think that everything we're saying speaks to why we have to build relationships with our students. We have to get to know them, especially kids, because they're not gonna ask for help. But we have to make them comfortable with us, so they feel like they can ask us for help. We gotta get to know our students, we gotta know if they bring the coat from backpack, so that we can make those connections with them, so that we know that mom's safe like that.
Like I'll speak on what Sam's saying. I don't think it necessarily has to be like from a value standpoint, a money thing. But if there's some type of, if you can make some type of connection, something that they value, that it's really like, if you can help them see that it is worth their time, that it's really something that's worth their time to do, that also return time. So don't get me wrong, sometimes it is a money thing, but other times.
Not a mom.
Yeah, yeah. So sometimes it's the money thing, other times it's other types of value that they actually place. If they can find a value and mean something to them, it kind of changes.
That might be a helpful thing for faculty, if you have a session sometime or part of a faculty meeting, 5 minutes, talk about what are the challenges of first generation students? How could we treat them a little differently or better, if you wish, so that we, because I really don't, both my parents went to college, so I don't understand the idea of a student coming for the first time other than who they want to, and I've heard where a student is just, their parents are so excited that they're in college, and hey, it's okay to get C's and D's, you're in college. And so the idea is, what else can I do to motivate them to move forward, especially if they want to go into a professional career, which requires more than just getting C's, of course.
So they don't feel intimidated too, because like if you have a student, because I'm in the same scenario, like I'm not first generation, so they may see me as, well, how can you even relate to my situation? Even though I'm empathetic, you don't know what I'm talking about, So I think that's a good idea.
Just put a plug, do a survey.
I already put it in the survey, I just answered it.
We can get them to understand. I want to know that, I'm like, no questions when you go out. If you already have all the answers, whether it's how do I do this, how do I do this, how do I do that, then you don't really have to say. A part of the education is not learning the knowledge, communicating, and admitting, I don't have all the answers. And a lot of times I'll tell kids that myself, I don't know the answer to that, let me call so-and-so when I'm well, I need the answer. Trying to make a connection point to role model to say it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to admit, you get overwhelmed. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, it's good.
So I was just gonna make a general statement. So when a student doesn't do well, and when we get those notes from Timothy that say the student is gonna be ineligible or something like that, one of the things that students can do and are encouraged to do is appeal to faculty council if they're actually ineligible. to come back, and a lot of the times that group will hear some of the things you guys are mentioning as the precipitating factors for why they didn't do well. And we all get that email at the end of the semester that says kind of if our students are gonna be ineligible or if they're not. One thing that would really help out your students that are on that list is if you look at that list and get them working on an ineligibility letter as quickly as possible at the beginning of the summer. Because Timothy can help them fill it out and list all the things. They can send it to us. Usually we're pretty good about approving those first ineligibility requests pretty quickly. But that helps the student get either know if they need to take classes during the summer, know if they're coming back. And it makes it a little bit easier for you as an advisor. More classes are open at that point. They get the eligibility. I know this is a little off topic of that scenario, but like if you get to that point with an advisee, and all of us have, it really helps them out if you pay attention to where they're landing on that list on the back of the scenario sheet you sent out. Because it does become kind of a problem for the student that continues. It's not just a one-time advising issue. It's kind of something that lives with them a lot, and so helping them out that way.
I was gonna add in something about, the class schedule. This scenario says about, that you met with them about scheduling already, and you may have to switch some of those classes if they're not gonna pass, because there's prerequisites or there's a course they may have to take again right away. So that's an action item that you have to look at if they're not gonna pass a class. You don't have to change it till the end of the semester, obviously, because they might pull it out. But it's something to start thinking about an alternate scenario.
It helps to follow up. You're talking about midterm. You also get those same letters at the end after the semester when somebody hasn't actually passed the class, midterm grades, but I tend to try to follow up with them, like, how is your grade doing? Is it coming up? What can we do? Have you tried this? And also, when you're talking about trying to get them to relate to getting them to come forward when there are these things going on and they don't always want to tell you or ask for things like that. I'm wondering maybe giving them examples of, I'm not talking about you, let's say this sister or your mother, or, especially, okay, you're doing this keep mom and you're with her, you're doing all this. Don't you feel like your mother would want you to get help just as you're helping her? You know what I mean? And then if this was your sister, if this was your brother, whoever, wouldn't you want, you don't want to ask for it yourself, but wouldn't you want them to have every advantage there? And these things are available. This is why we do it. Really care about their success and resources that need someone. It seems like they're a little more willing to relate it to something they would have.
Can I just make one point? I think what we need to remember when they come to the first class and they say, I'm good, Val. I can't do it. I don't like the way Val teaches. I think everything everybody